In this episode of the Smart City podcast, I interviewed the Director of Harvest Digital Planning, Brian Ashton. Brian is passionate about creating and also about geospatial technology, and he combines these two things together to help government to better engage with the community. Brian and I discussed many things mainly focused around using digital and spatial technology to better engage and integrate across all disciplines, government, and community. Brian has some really big and great ideas in this space, some of which include breaking down data silos for better integration, data knowledge grab for planning, testing smart tech in real places, and thick data to bring social meaning to big data. As always, I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
It's the Smart City Podcast, whoa, with Smart City experts, here we go. Connecting smart technology, both big and small. Smart cities are making life better for all. Big data, emerging trends, self-driving cars and more. The Smart City Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Brian. How are you this evening?
Good, Zoe. How are you?
I'm very well. Let's jump straight in, and can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you are passionate about?
Sure. So I suppose my background is I studied computer systems engineering and business at RMIT. Sort of that was in the early 2000s, and I suppose like a lot of people who finished their course, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do kind of with my life. I ended up taking a position at a company called KPMG, like a financial services company. And I joined their IT sort of advisory practice. And at the time I thought, that'll be interesting. I'll get to work with a whole range of different sort of clients and work on different projects and sort of get to blend sort of this technical and business degree that I sort of earned. But after a couple of years kind of working there, I sort of found like it didn't quite fit what I wanted to do with my life. Sort of felt like I wanted to do something a little bit more creative and sort of build things and do different things. And I suppose, like I said, one of the benefits was working in KPMG. I got to see lots of stuff. And one of the, I suppose, IT systems that I came across there was GIS, so like Geographic Information Systems. The more sort of I read about that stuff, I thought that sounds really, really cool. The idea that you can sort of take all this data and create digital maps and combine that with remote sensing data and GPS, and I thought that's kind of what I wanted to do next, like very visual and technical. And so I decided to kind of go back to uni and do a master's in geospatial information. And yeah, that was sort of a seminal moment for me. Like it was kind of opened up my eyes to this kind of whole new world of geography, which I'd always had an interest in, but like didn't really understand kind of the academia side of it, so like human geography and all the sort of social science stuff. Yeah, that whole course was amazing, and going back and doing it as kind of a mature age student was, I think, really beneficial. Sort of got to really focus in on all the things I kind of liked and picked my subjects. But I think the downside of obviously doing sort of a degree when you're a mature age student is still got to pay the bills, I suppose. So I ended up finding, like, luckily enough, sort of advertised within the university was this part-time job at this urban design and planning firm called David Locke Associates, and I thought that sounds interesting. It's sort of GIS analyst position. It sounded like a reasonably low level, but it's my first job in this kind of area, so why not? So I applied for the job, and luckily enough was able to get it. And that's when I first I felt like I truly got sort of exposed to cities, I suppose, and planning and architecture and all the different things that happening there. And got to do some like sort of interesting projects around spatial analysis and land use suitability analysis and things like that. But I suppose, like, again, sort of fork in the road moment, which happened at David Locke Associates, was I got to meet my sort of co-founder now, Adam Smith. And I think sort of working together for a couple of years, we sort of realized like we had a whole bunch of common interests around technology and GIS and spatial analysis. And I think after talking together for like on and off for a few months and talking over drinks and things like that, we'd sort of thought, I think there's a real opportunity to sort of start a business that would sort of bring technology or better use technology to help them sort of inform urban planning and urban design process. And, eventually we took the leap and sort of in 2011 we started a company that's still going. It's called Harvest. And yeah, it was kind of built to sort of combine this people, place and technology and, really lucky enough to sort of, start a company built around those passions. So, now the company's been going for 7-8 years now. So it's sort of going from strength to strength, which is really exciting and growing the team and everything. So that's sort of my background, I suppose.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really keen to hear more about what your company does, but let's talk a little bit first about what kind of sparked your interest in the smart city space.
Yeah, I suppose sort of a little bit what I just mentioned there, sort of, I think, when Adam and I started Harvest back in 2011, to be honest, we weren't that aware of the concept of smart cities. Looking back at it now, it was obviously around, but for whatever reason, we weren't really that aware of it. We kind of, were aware of, urban, things like urban informatics and urban analytics, and a bunch of stuff like that. But we were just super interested. We just thought there was so much opportunity to bring, to use technology within planning and more broadly cities to help make better decisions, more informed decisions based on, evidence and data. And, we were really interested in the idea of better engaging the community and having them contribute to the planning process and finding ways to get spatial feedback or qualitative feedback to better improve plans. I think that sort of curiosity and interest about improving our cities, I think is what our company's all about and our mission. And I think that's what we're still interested in to this day.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Are there any particular technologies that you've come across that you're really interested in exploring?
I still think one of my core interests is definitely still the geospatial technology and location intelligence work that's happening. I think especially in this smart city space, I think cities are obviously inherently spatial, and I think all this sort of spatial data and location intelligence is definitely underpinning a lot of these smart city applications and platforms that I'm seeing. I think there's so much interesting stuff happening in this space. Whether it be something like precision agriculture and where people are using LiDAR data and GPS data to better inform farming practices and helping them sort of get better crop yields and understanding those sort of things, or even how sort of people are sort of using maps with autonomous vehicles. I work that companies like Deep Map are doing. It's super interesting, where they're basically trying to develop super high definition maps. They're basically machines, not even humans. They're trying to get machines to understand maps in some respect. That stuff is I think really, really super interesting. Even to a lesser extent, how all these different sort of mapping platforms are working with augmented reality and virtual reality to sort of bring location into those platforms, whether it's places of interest data or real-time location data, in an augmented reality sense. I think that's super fascinating for cities and has huge applications. And, even just general, democratization of these location intelligence tools, which is going to really help, I think, users and governments to perform spatial analysis and better understand, what's happening within their neighborhoods and understanding sort of the dynamics of their cities. I think a lot of this work is really, really interesting and stuff that we kind of research quite often as part of our business and find ways to we think about ways that we could potentially apply these technologies within our projects and products.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's talk about some of the things you're working on at the moment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no problem. So I suppose, Harvest has kind of multiple sort of, services that we offer. I think the key one that we've kind of really sort of been focusing on the last few years has been around participation technology. So creating solutions that allow community to provide feedback on different projects, and we kind of have two parts of that. We build like custom kind of solutions. So one that comes to mind is we just recently built something for the City of Brimbank in Melbourne called Plan Brimbank, and it was sort of built an interactive game that sort of hopefully help sort of the community better understand, or help government better understand priorities of the community. And what we're doing there is sort of presenting the community with these kind of different images based around these priorities, and they sort of get to do a trade-off, which ones do they prefer, and then based on that data, running through these different things multiple times, hopefully there's sort of some insights that can be yielded sort of around communities' priorities, whether it be like how they expect housing to be developed in their communities, or what are their priorities around transport and things like that. And that they're kind of really fun little projects that we get to do. But I suppose like one of the big things that we do as a company is we develop a community engagement platform, which we call the Hive. It's kind of a way for sort of empower governments to sort of build out their own engagement projects in-house. Like we basically give them the tools. They can kind of launch engagement projects, add feedback tools, add content, rich media, things like that. And I suppose that's what we basically do a lot of our time as a business. We basically are improving that product, constantly looking at ways that we can create better tools that can help inform communities of changes that are happening in their area, finding better ways to get feedback from the community, making sure that the data that we're getting is useful and can be analysed and sort of actioned. So I suppose, that's what we spend most of our day doing. And we have a bunch of customers who use the tool, like State Government Victoria and overseas in Canada, different cities. And it's like lots of interesting projects that these cities are doing and engaging their communities on. So
cool. So your tool that you were talking about, so obviously there's that little bit of gamification there. I find that really interesting. Do you go out into the community, or is it all done like on a digital interface?
So it's obviously all online, so it's like a web application. But we often sort of, when we create these projects, we often talk about the council or government's engagement strategy, and I think often you want to sort of somehow marry the kind of offline and online stuff. So we often talk about these strategies, and a lot of the times, the best approach is to take out, iPads into the community and run pop-ups, link these into different events or festivals that are happening and try to engage the community. But, the key being to try and get them to give their feedback online using this tool in some ways, because that way you can kind of create this database that is consistent and, so I think, trying to marry that offline and online is always like kind of tricky, but I think if you can have it sort of fed into this one area, it does help with the analysis and can kind of better see those trends.
Yeah, cool. And so the other one you're talking about there is Hive.
Yep.
So is that as a government agency, people engage that service, so then they can then use that service to engage with the community? Is that how? Yeah,
exactly. It's that kind of, software as a service model that, we license out the application, all the tools, and, they have, the agency in this case would have, carte blanche in terms of, how many projects they would launch and the tools that they would add, and, it'd be very much up to them and their strategy about how they want to engage the community. But we provide a lot of different tools and give them lots of different options, ways to do that. Things from creating different sort of priorities tools around participatory budgeting, so you can allow the community to sort of understand government's perspective in terms of the trade-offs they have to make, being able to leave spatial feedback, being able to sort of let the community tell stories, to have cute sort of question and answer tools, so it's sort of a bit of a two-way dialogue happening. So we kind of give through the tools give government agencies lots of flexibility so they can run sort of the best engagement process that they can.
Yeah, cool. Oh, sounds really interesting, and I'm keen to kind of go on your website and have a bit of a play around. Let's talk about Australia overall. I know you're in Victoria, so let's narrow down to Victoria, and let's talk a little bit about how or where you think Victoria kind of ranks when it comes to smart cities.
Super interesting question. I suppose if I was to just talk about my own little niche in community engagement, I actually think Australia pretty progressive in terms of community engagement space. I think we sort of often actually look to in terms of best practice, both in building tools and different frameworks and things. I think that's the reason why we win work in North America and is because they kind of look to Australia and say, what are these guys doing?
Okay. Cool.
So I think that's in terms of the community engagement space, I think we actually are kind of ranked pretty high. If I kind of pull out to whole smart cities sort of industry, to be honest, I don't know where Australia ranks. I know there's a lot of obviously buzz and talk and there's lots of interesting research happening in this country, and I think in terms of that, it looks like we're doing a good job. I think I sort of struggle with this idea of sort of ranking around smart cities. I don't know if that's the best way or the best prism that we should be looking through or evaluating ourselves. I suppose you see these different smart city rankings come out, and it says different cities. These are the top 10 smart cities in the world, and I don't know. I sort of sometimes cringe at those rankings. I think kind of missing the mark a little bit. I think people probably acknowledge they're inherently biased towards large cities and cities that have large economies that can afford solutions. But the thing that this is my personal opinion, but I feel like we should be, just thinking about ranking cities in terms of, quality of life and sustainability and resilience, and then in some ways, finding a way to correlate that to the sort of smart cities work that we're doing, and sort of seeing, are the applications that we're sort of introducing to our cities marrying up to these quality of life rankings? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I really enjoy that answer actually. Because I asked this question. I asked this question because I think gets you thinking about, okay, well, if I were to rank something in the smart city space, how would I actually do that? Because there are so many different aspects to it. It's exactly what you just described there.
Because it's kind of like you see, I don't want to pick on a particular city, but you see like San Francisco, it's ranked really high in terms of its smart city ranking or whatever. But then you hear all these stories about homelessness issues and cost of living and affordability and congestion, and I kind of wonder is that really the best example of a city? So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I definitely I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a really good conversation that we need, that overall, we need to have, that we're not actually trying to aim for some kind of, now we're on the smart cities map. I mean, that might be useful in some aspects, so then you get some attention and some funds and that kind of thing. But fundamentally, what is the point of the smart city? Well, it's supposed to, make it more livable, accessible and sustainable for everyone involved. And I think if just because you rank high on a smart city scale, does that mean that your community is engaged? It might mean that, because that's might be how that fed into that. But it kind of, unless we're ranking or thinking about that livability factor, a smart city ranking might not be useful at all.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's not a bad exercise to go rank smart cities, but yeah, unless you're correlating those back to livability or whatever, it's kind of pointless to sort of stand on its own.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that's the thing. It depends how it's done and who's doing it and where those biases come in. Yeah, for sure. So no, thanks. That was a great answer. Let's talk a little bit about some of the places that they're piloting smart technology. So where do you think are good places or cities or you can name a place or a type of place or whatever to pilot this smart tech?
Yeah, I think, with a lot of these questions, I feel like it sort of depends.
Yeah.
I think with all of these kind of solutions and things that we're coming up with, I think obviously the first question you asked is what sort of problem I'm trying to solve, and then I think based on that would probably determine where you're going to pilot a smart city technology. I think if you pick a random example, if you're trying to build a mobility solution or something like that, you want to pilot that in an area where you're actually going to get appropriate feedback. There's no point in going and testing that in a rural community that doesn't have a mobility issue. You want to test that in an area that has a mobility issue that you're trying to solve. But if you think about I had like a general purpose sort of smart city technology, I think you always want to test this stuff in an area that has a diverse community. I don't think you'll never understand like the impact that you're going to have by introducing the technology unless you get a really good cross section of the population, whether it be like different ages and ethnicities or religious backgrounds or different geographies. Geography of a city could have a huge impact on technology that you can introduce. So I think that's really important. I think probably the most important thing I would say when piloting smart city technology is probably the best idea is not to test them on greenfield sites in some respects. Like it obviously depends on the technology, but I don't quite get why we would build a whole new city to test a smart city technology. I feel like that's not. It's kind of it has an underappreciation of what our cities actually are and what their makeup is. If you really want to if your whole goal is to kind of improve the places that we live in, like we sort of talked about, by introducing some smart city technology, I think you're going to want to at some point introduce that into an actual place, and we understand places are complex and there's always different sort of histories and communities have the different ways that they sort of have evolved over the years. And we have all this different infrastructure, which could be really hard to deal with, it's unmaintained or old or whatever. So I don't know. I just sort of have this feeling that if we do test this stuff, we kind of want to test these into real places as much as possible.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting point and one I hadn't really thought about before. But I was just thinking that I've been talking about Songdo in South Korea because I went there when I was in South Korea, and I had a conversation early on in the podcast with Nancy Odendal, and I remember her mentioning Songdo, and I don't really remember what I said about Songdo at the time. I probably said, oh, yeah, that's a cool smart city or whatever. But then when I actually thought about it, I went, well, is it really? Because when I went there, there was some cool tech and whatever, and you saw a big flashy screen and all that stuff, but there was no one there, right?
Yeah.
I was like,
and
just me.
Like a reasonably small population from memory, it's only maybe aiming for a couple of 100,000 people or something.
And I couldn't even hazard a guess at how many people were there, but it definitely didn't feel like South Korea because I'd spent a lot of time in Seoul, and then it was like, oh yeah, this is South Korea's smart city, but actually Seoul is the smart city. I felt like it was when I was there. I didn't know much about smart cities at the time, but now I think back and Seoul definitely felt like it was smart, like I could get around. It was accessible. It was safe. It was, what's the word? Livable, I suppose, if that's what you're looking for, because I also felt like it needed more green space and all those type of things. So, pros and cons, of course. And coming from an Australian background, we're spoilt for green space. But yeah, so I really like that. Thinking about integrating into the communities we already have, rather than just trying to make these, smart communities that don't actually exist and that we want to draw people to. It's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. It kind of obviously depends on the technology. Like, you don't want to start off with autonomous cars like in the middle of the streets of Melbourne, but at some point, you have to test these things within like actual places that we live.
Yeah, agreed. Let's talk a little bit about integration. So, have you got any ideas about how we can better integrate across, the different disciplines, governments, and industries?
I think there's lots of research around like how do you have better solutions and how you integrate. And I think a lot of people talk about sort of methods for doing that. You want to build cross-functional teams, diverse teams, to help solve problems, and that way you can better integrate and you get better perspectives about all these different disciplines. Sort of more empathy for what one discipline is trying to do versus another discipline, things like that. But I think if you think about sort of where I work a lot of these days, like my sense is not going to be able to ever sort of integrate across government or community or vendors across these disciplines until we, I suppose, really break down these data silos that would exist. Would be vendors holding data. Obviously, lots of different government departments would be holding their own data. Until we sort of break down those silos and find ways to better share that information, have more transparency about data, and find ways to further democratize the tools to be able to use that data effectively. It seems like that integration piece is gonna be hard. When I think about what would be ideal platform, city platform that all these disciplines within government or vendors or the community could use. It seems like maybe a little bit silly, but I kind of always think about the Google Knowledge Graph. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say the Google Knowledge Graph?
No, explain.
So I think everyone would be aware of it. This probably don't know what it's called, but you know how you go to Google, you type in a search term, for example, Flinders Street Station, then up on the right-hand side, if you're on the desktop, you see this little panel, and it will say Flinders Street Station, here's the map, here's some photos, here's Street View, here's some history, I don't know, here's some reviews of the thing, here's the train timetable, things like that. I can always imagine some sort of platform that, it'd be really cool if we could do that for cities. So you can kind of type in, you're a landscape architect, you want to type in, you're going to do a master plan, this little park, you type in the name of the park into this platform, and suddenly you get all this information. So you can see, here's what, these other disciplines have been doing, here's the service requests by the maintenance guys, here's the results of the community engagement strategy from the water strategy that was done. Cool, I can see what people said about that. I can see the development planning applications around here and why things were not approved or approved. Suddenly, I think you get a really good appreciation for what all these different disciplines are doing. And the community had access to tools like that as well as government. I think it would be really radical in terms of information sharing and understanding of places. And that's obviously a very technological solution, but it's just something that I always sort of think about.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Sometimes integration comes down to, it's not simple, but the concept is simple, that we can share data openly and transparently across the different areas, and that we can kind of break down those traditional barriers that exist, that, I have to think like this because I'm the government, you think like that because you're, in academia or something like that.
Yeah.
But then sharing data, so then we're just making decisions based on evidence and data, rather than all coming in with our individual vetted interests.
Well, yeah, to some extent, but I think just if you give you share this data amongst disciplines and like you said, and the community and government, I think like you can also find ways where you can see, oh, actually this data is incorrect, or might give like an opportunity for the community to add context to this data through their own way, or they can see that this is how a decision made, and actually that decision was biased. And here's why. And I don't know. I think until you sort of get to that point, like it's not so much about like having the data as this kind of fact-based situation, but just sharing it and allow people to interrogate it and they can draw their own insights. I think that's sort of super powerful.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk a little bit about emerging trends. And the ones I want to talk about are the ones that people aren't talking about openly. So do you have any ideas on emerging trends that people aren't talking about?
Yeah, I think sort of, I suppose on that same sort of track that we're just maybe talking about, like, I think, there's a lot of talk about, like big data. And I think, rightfully so, like, I think the amount of data that we're going to generate is going to be huge, in cities in the future. I think if you'd asked me this question a few years ago, I probably would have said, you need to think about, re-putting citizens back as the focus. I reckon based on sort of my read of the situation is I think people are doing that. But I think maybe what's missing as part of that conversation is you probably still sort of, I don't know, there's still a bit of a lacking of engagement with citizens about smart cities and how they want to shape the policies around smart cities. And I think this links to big data in terms of I think maybe don't fully understand what it means with big data. I think, to get to a situation with big data, there's like lots of cleansing that's been done. Context has been probably somewhat stripped out in some of the meaning. And I think, I've read some really interesting articles. There's probably one recently, like it was in the conversation that was about like thinking about big data and thick data. They're telling like thick data about like more qualitative information, so information that's been either done from like ethnographic studies or somehow where you've imbued the stories of the community or collected the stories of the community. And that way you can sort of help qualify the results that you're getting from big data insights with these stories and kind of bring kind of more context and social meaning to big data. I think that's probably something that we're not thinking about or talking enough about.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one to think about, I guess. And like data and community engagement and how those two kind of really intertwine, and how we can better incorporate those two things together as well.
I think like, when you think about like cities and what makes cities so unique, I think it's actually kind of some of the informal stuff and it's really about the people and their histories and the stories and these communities and things like that. And I think big data is really important because it can help us, really yield these insights that we would never be humanly possible. But at the same time, you don't want to miss those kind of miss that social meaning, or there might be something that's being missed, like that you don't know, like the sensor wasn't configured properly and it's reporting something as being fine, but it's actually not. You need to be able to correlate that stuff with the people on the ground and what they say and things like that. So
yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Well, it's been so great to talk to you this evening, Brian, and I really like the perspective that you've brought, which is combining that big data with the community engagement side of things. Because I've talked to a lot of people about that human-centric approach, but I think you've brought in this kind of tool that you've developed and that's going strong, which is about exactly that and that engagement and how we can use that in a smart city. So it kind of brings that really tangible and practical approach to that. So yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, not a problem. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, I only have one last question for you, which is how can people connect with you?
I think like the obvious ones. I think LinkedIn's always a good one to connect with me, and also probably via our company website, which is harvestdp.com. You can probably find my details,
Yeah, well, I'll put all the links and everything in the show notes so people can click and find you and connect with you.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Brian, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good.
It's the Smart City Podcast. Whoa.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart City Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes can be found at thesmartcitypodcast.com. If you have any questions or comments for me or any of my guests, connect with me via email, zoe@thesmartcitypodcast.com, or via the socials. I'm on Twitter and Facebook @SmartCityPod. As always, I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
Smart City Podcast is what you're looking for.